Angra Mainyu is the Avestan-language name of Zoroastrianism's hypostasis of the destructive spirit. The Middle Persian equivalent is Ahriman. In the Avesta in Zoroaster's revelation Avestan-Angra Mainyu seems to have been an original conception of Zoroaster's. In the Gathas, which are the oldest texts of Zoroastrianism and are attributed to the prophet himself, Angra Mainyu is not yet a proper name. In the one instance in these hymns where the two words appear together, the concept spoken of is that of a Mainyu that is Angra. In this single instance in Yasna 45.2 the more bounteous of the spirits twain declares Angra Mainyu to be its absolute antithesis. A similar statement occurs in Yasna 30.3, where the antithesis is however also known as Mainyu, also known as being the Avestan-language word for evil. Hence, also known as Mainyu is the evil spirit, or evil mind, or evil thought, as contrasted with Spenta Mainyu, the bounteous spirit with which Ahura Mazda conceived of creation, which then was. The also known as Mainyu epithet recurs in Yasna 32.5, when the principle is identified with the devas that deceive humankind and themselves. While in later Zoroastrianism, the devas are demons, this is not yet evident in the Gathas. Zoroaster stated that the devas are wrong gods, or false gods that are to be rejected, but they are not yet demons. In Yasna 32.3, these devas are identified as the offspring, not of Angra Mainyu, but of Ahriman, evil thinking. A few verses earlier it is however the Ahriman, deceiver Ahura not otherwise identified but probably Angra Mainyu Ahura, who induces the devas to choose a chistam manaha Ahura worst thinking. In Yasna 32.13, the abode of the wicked is not the abode of Angra Mainyu, but the abode of the same worst thinking. One would have expected Angra Mainyu to reign in hell, since he had created death and how, at the end, the worst existence shall be for the deceitful. In the younger Avesta Yasna 19.15 recalls that Ahura Mazda's recital of the Ayunavaryu invocation puts Angra Mainyu in a stupor. In Yasna 9.8, Angra Mainyu creates or three-quarters Idadhaka, but the serpent recoils at the sight of Mithra's mace. In Yash 13, the Pravashis diffuse Angra Mainyu's plans to dry up the earth, and in Yash 8.44 Angra Mainyu battles but cannot defeat Taishya and so prevent the rains. In Vendidad 19, Angra Mainyu urges Zoroaster to turn from the good religion by promising him sovereignty of the world. On being rejected, Angra Mainyu assails the prophet with legions of demons, but Zoroaster deflects them all. In Yash 19.96, a verse that reflects a Gathic conjunction, Angra Mainyu will be vanquished and Ahura Mazda will ultimately prevail. In Yash 19.46 ff, Angra Mainyu and Spenta Mainyu battle for possession of Kvarana, divine glory, or fortune. In some verses of the Yasna, the two principles are said to have created the world, which contradicts the Gathic principle that declares Ahura Mazda to be the sole creator and which is reiterated in the Cosmogony of Vendidad 1. In that first chapter, which is the basis for the 9th–12th century Buntution, the creation of 16 lands by Ahura Mazda is countered by the Angra Mainyu's creation of 16 scourges such as winter, sickness, and vice. This shift in the position of Ahura Mazda, his total assimilation to this bounteous spirit, Mazda's instrument of creation, must have taken place in the 4th century BC at the latest. For it is reflected in Aristotle's testimony, which confronts Ariamanios with Ramazds. Yasht 15.43 assigns Angra Mainyu to the netherworld, a world of darkness. So also Vendidad 19.47, but other passages in the same chapter have him dwelling in the region of the Devas, which the Vendidad asserts is in the north. There, Angra Mainyu is the Devanamdevo, Devo of Devas, or chief of the Devas. The superlative Devotayama is however assigned to the demon Patisha. In an enumeration of the Devas in Vendidad 1.43, Angra Mainyu appears first and Patisha appears last. Nowhere is Angra Mainyu said to be the creator of the Devas or their father. In Zurvanite Zoroastrianism, Zurvanism was a branch of Zoroastrianism that sought to resolve the dilemma of the twin spirits of Yasna 30.3. The resolution, which probably developed out of the contact with Chaldea, was to have both Ahura Mazda and Angra Mainyu as twin sons of the first principal time. Zurvanism was strongly criticized as a heresy during the Sassanid period of Iranian history, an era in which it probably also had its largest following. Although the monist doctrine is not attested after the 10th century, some Zurvanite features are nonetheless still evident in present-day Zoroastrianism. Zurvanism's principal feature is then the notion that both Ahura Mazda and Angra Mainyu were twin brothers, with the former being the epitome of good and the latter being the epitome of evil. Further, this dichotomy was by choice, that is, Angra Mainyu chose to be evil. It is not that I cannot create anything good, but that I will not. And to prove this, he created the peacock. The mythology of the twins is only attested in the post-Sassanid Syriac and Armenian polemics such as that of Tsik of Kolb. According to these sources, the Genesis saw Zurvan as an androgynous deity, existing alone but desiring offspring who would create heaven and hell and everything in between. Zurvan then sacrificed for 1,000 years. Towards the end of this period, Zurvan began to doubt the efficacy of sacrifice, and in the moment of this doubt Ahriman and Ahriman were conceived, Ahriman for the sacrifice and Ahriman for the doubt. Upon realizing that twins were to be born, Zurvan resolved to grant the firstborn sovereignty over creation. Ahriman perceived Zurvan's decision, which he then communicated to his brother. Ahriman then preempted Ahriman by ripping open the womb to emerge first. Reminded of the resolution to grant Ahriman sovereignty, Zurvan conceded, but limited kingship to a period of 9,000 years, after which Ahriman would rule for all eternity. In Zoroastrian tradition, in the Pahlavi texts of the 9th–12th century, Ahriman is frequently written upside down as a sign of contempt and disgust. In the Book of Arda-Viraf 5.10, the narrator the righteous Viraf is taken by Sarosh and Adar to see the reality of God and the archangels, and the non-reality of Ahriman and the demons. This idea of non-reality is also expressed in other texts, such as the Denkard, a 9th-century encyclopedia of Mazdaism, which states Ahriman has never been and never will be. In chapter 100 of Book of the Arda-Viraf, which is titled Ahriman, the narrator sees the evil spirit, whose religion is evil, and whoever ridiculed and mocked the wicked in hell. In the Zurvanite ulama Islam, Ahriman also is called by some name by some people and they ascribe evil unto him, but nothing can also be done by him without time. A few chapters later, the ulama notes that it is clear that Ahriman is a non-entity, but at the resurrection Ahriman will be destroyed and thereafter all will be good. And, change will proceed through the will of God. In the Sad-Dan, the world is described as having been created by Ahriman and become pure through his truth. But Ahriman, being devoid of anything good, does not issue from that which is owing to truth. Book of Jamsby 2.3 notes that Ahriman, like a worm, is so much associated with darkness and old age, that he perishes in the end. Chapter 4.3 recalls the grotesque legend of Tamarus briding Angra Mainyu for 30 years and so preventing him from doing evil. In Chapter 7, Jamsp explains that the Indians declare Ahriman will die, but those, who are not of good religion, go to hell. The Buntashan, a Zoroastrian account of creation completed in the 12th century, has much to say about Ahriman and his role in the cosmogony. In Chapter 1.23, following the recitation of the Ayuna Hermes takes advantage of Ahriman's incapacity to create life without intervention. When Ahriman recovers, he creates J, the primal whore who affects women with their menstrual cycles. In Buntashan 4.12, Ahriman perceives that Hermes is superior to himself, and so flees to fashion his many demons with which to conquer the universe in battle. The entire universe is finally divided between the Hermes and the Yezads on one side and Ahriman with his deaths on the other. Ahriman slays the primal bull, but the moon rescues the seed of the dying creature, and from it springs all animal creation. But the battle goes on, with mankind caught in the middle, whose duty it remains to withstand the forces of evil through good thoughts, words and deeds. Other texts see the world created by Hermes as a trap for Ahriman, who is then distracted by creation and expends his force in a battle he cannot win. The distant Enig explains that Hermes, being omniscient, knew of Ahriman's intent, but it would have been against his justice and goodness to punish Ahriman before he wrought evil, and this is why the world is created. Ahriman has no such omniscience, a fact that Hermes reminds him of. In contrast, in Manichaean scripture, Mani ascribes foresight to Ahriman. In present-day Zoroastrianism, in 1862, Martin Haug proposed a new reconstruction of what he believed was Zarathustra's original monotheistic teaching, as expressed in the Gathas, a teaching which he believed had been corrupted by later Zoroastrian dualistic tradition as expressed in post-Gathic scripture and in the texts of tradition. For Angra Mainyu, this interpretation meant a demotion from a spirit coeval with Ahura Mazda to a mere product of Ahura Mazda. Haug's theory was based to a great extent on a new interpretation of Yasna 30.3. He argued that the good twin in that passage should not be regarded as more or less identical to Ahura Mazda, as earlier Zoroastrian thought had assumed, but as a separate created entity, Spenta Mainyu. Thus, both Angra Mainyu and Spenta Mainyu were created by Ahura Mazda and should be regarded as his respective creative and destructive emanations. Haug's interpretation was gratefully received by the Parsis of Bombay, who at the time were under considerable pressure from Christian missionaries who sought converts among the Zoroastrian community and criticized Zoroastrianism for its alleged dualism as contrasted with their own monotheism. Haug's reconstruction had also other attractive aspects that seemed to make the religion more compatible with 19th-century Enlightenment, as he attributed to Zoroaster a rejection of rituals and of worship of entities other than the supreme deity. The new ideas were subsequently disseminated as a Parsi interpretation, which eventually reached the West and so in turn corroborated Haug's theories. Among the Parsis of the cities, who were accustomed to English language literature, Haug's ideas were more often repeated than those of the Gujarati language objections of the priests, with the result that Haug's ideas became well entrenched and are today almost universally accepted as doctrine. While some modern scholars have theories similar to Haug's regarding Angra Mainyu's origins, many now think that the traditional dualist interpretation was in fact correct all along and that Angra Mainyu was always considered to be completely separate and independent from Ahura Mazda. Anthroposophy. Rudolf Steiner used the concept of Ahriman to name one of two extreme forces which pull humanity away from the centering influence of Christ. Steiner associated Ahriman, the lower spirit, with materialism, science, hereditary, objectivity and soul hardening. He thought that contemporary Christianity was subject to Ahrimanic influence, since it tended towards materialistic interpretations. Steiner predicted that Ahriman, as a supersensible being, would incarnate into a human form, some little time after our present earthly existence, in fact in the third post-Christian millennium. In popular culture, literature, Ahriman is featured under the name Ahrimanes in Lord Byron's dramatic poem Manfred. John Wellington Wells in Gilbert and Sullivan's 1877 operetta The Sorcerer states that either he or Alexis Poindexter must yield up his life to Ahrimanes in order to undo the love potion's effect. Ormazd and Ahriman feature heavily in the Philip K. Dick novel The Cosmic Puppets. In Eva Botson's Witch, the great wizard Ahriman the Awful tries to select a suitable witch wife. Ahriman features as the alter ego of the anti-hero in Roger Zelazny's book The Mask of Loki. Angra Mainyu is the deity worshipped by the Markagya and his death priests in the third book of Jacqueline Carey's Kushiel's Legacy series, titled Kushiel's Avatar. Television. Ahriman is featured as a demonic enemy of Duncan MacLeod in the last episode of Season 5 and the first couple episodes of Season 6 of the Highlander TV series. Angra Mainyu appears in the Fate Zero anime, video games. Ahriman features in the Sega CD turn-based strategy game Dark Wizard. The English version of the game uses the spelling Ahriman, which is likely to be the effect of an improper Japanese transliteration. Angra Mainyu is the final boss of the fighting game Severance, Blade of Darkness. A powerful enemy known as Angra Mainyu can be fought in the role-playing video game Final Fantasy X2. Angra Mainyu dwells within the Holy Grail in the visual novel Fate Stay Night, and in the sequel Fate Hollow Ataraxia as a servant. Angra is the final boss of the beat-em-up video game God Hand. Ormazd and Ahriman are featured in Prince of Persia. The name Angra Mainyu was changed to Chandra Manaya, the queen of the destructive Argons, in the video game TERA. Angra Mainyu is a high-level boss in Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Reborn. A painting depicting Angra Mainyu can be seen in one of the endings of Anna, Extended Edition. Music: Angra, a Brazilian progressive power metal band. Notes. Bibliography.